Hello and welcome. Now, why didn't I see this bush here when I was looking? I think it's okay. And hello and welcome. Somewhat undignified beginning, which is appropriate for the first comment because you're asking, I have a lot of stress these days and a lot of negative traits pop up. I still meditate for an hour at least. Can it help reduce my kilesas? So, I'm by no means comparing my own situation to that of yours, but ordinarily I'm used and very fortunate to have a situation whereby I can sit and discuss your comments and questions without intrusion from wild thorny plants and in the relative comfort of my kuti there. Someone did make a comment to say that they found the builder's noises rather intrusive. Well, there's a lesson to be learned there also. We don't always have things the way we'd like them to be. I've of course no complaints whatsoever. I'm sitting on a paradise tropical beach, completely undisturbed by people. Just the sound of the waves in the background. A little wind, a little breeze, sea breeze, which is nice, keeping me cool. And I hope none of that is intrusive and we can focus on the Dharma. Of course, as you know, this project continues that I set out at the beginning of Vassa, this rains retreat period, with something in mind, a determination. Two things: to learn a little bit of the Sinhala language, or Sinhalese, and also to provide a place, a space for people to sit and meditate if they should come to visit me, and some more practical facilities like a toilet, but for those visitors, that is. But most importantly, a meditation hall. We've called it, I suppose I have called it, I've yet to receive any other suggestions, Samadhi Sala, and apart from a couple of hitches, a bit of confusion with the language barrier, it's progressing well. We're now well on the way to getting the walls finished and in place, ready for plastering, the new roof to be, or the old roof to be replaced and put back on old rafters. And I've been having many conversations, albeit very stilted, with regards to ridgepoles and rafters, which you'll no doubt find familiar in relation to the teachings of the Buddha and in relations to his teachings on the kilesas. In this comment here, you're saying stress and negative traits still pop up. Yes. When we don't want something, as when I first sat down here, oh, why didn't I notice that? I was busy focusing on the picture in the window to make sure I was pointing the camera in the right direction and not thinking about where I was going to be sitting. But we're okay now. It's never as we expect it to be. And if we don't expect it to be, then we are not going to be disappointed. The more we expect, the more disappointed we can expect to be. So reduce our expectations, firstly. This is going some way towards reducing those kilesas. We're looking, a reminder here, what the kilesas are. That's the Pali word for defilements, being the root defilements, greed, hatred, and delusion. The Pali words for those are lobha, dosa, moha. Greed, hatred, and delusion. They're the cause of all of our suffering. They're at the root of our suffering. And it is those defilements we're looking to eradicate. In fact, by eradication, and in one sutta and in an extract of that sutta in the Dhammapada, I think it's where the Buddha describes this removing, breaking down the ridgepole, and therefore the rafters of the roof all collapsing. So on my explanation this morning to the builders, whom were busily making our meditation hall into a house, I had to put them quite straight and say, no, the walls that are falling down don't need repairing, let them fall down. We will put up a ridgepole and columns, and thus have a hall for us to all sit and meditate in, on a nice shiny floor. Shiny being polished concrete, I hope. And yes, their eyes lit up. They understood exactly what I was saying, even though it was in English. And it makes for a more straightforward process, I think, and was my original plan, or the original plan. So keep meditating, in answer to your question. The more we meditate, the more, albeit gradual, the progress, the more we eat away at the foundations of those ridgepoles, that ridgepole of the kilesas, wanting things to be some way that they are not. Eventually finding contentment in just the way it is, and just that. Because it is that contentment that is the cause of happiness. Because it is the discontentment, of course, that is the cause of unhappiness or suffering, dukkha. So keep meditating. And my retreat, my 3 months retreat period, is a little interrupted by all the works going on. And I could get stressed, I could get hot and bothered. The electricity was off for a whole day, so I had to keep the door shut. I can't really shut my windows because they're not shuttable, which is good, I like them open. But just to keep some of the dust out, I couldn't have the fan on. It got hot. I came down here and it was very hot. But one has to just, in the end, sit and meditate without dwelling and thinking on it, but firstly just establishing what it is you're not liking. Well, it's because it's so hot, I've got no fan, I'm sweating, I can't get away anywhere from it, there's noise, there's dust, it's not as it usually is. But also, it's very comfortable, and there is nothing to complain about. There's sound that I don't ordinarily hear, but it's just ears hearing sound that I don't ordinarily hear. It's out of place. Like a dog barking in the night might wake you, as it did last night. I went to see the dog and sat with the dog for a while. It's the same dog, the familiar dog that you know. And it stopped barking. It was quite happy. But I asked its owner, I think it's its owner, this morning, what the problem with the dog last night was. And they said it was mosquitoes. So I'm going to take one of my mosquito coils and put it not too near the dog in case it doesn't like it, but in that vicinity, let's say, tonight, to see if it helps. I wasn't aware that dogs were so perturbed by mosquitoes as some humans might be. But you can understand that it was unhappy. It was unsatisfied with the way things were at the time. But just by being its friend, it was soon calmed down. You see, monks are not allowed to cut foliage, otherwise you might say, why don't you just break that piece off? So if I had a kapia here, an assistant, staying with me in my meditation hall, that's a long way into the future, but say that was the case, he could just maybe clip that off. But we mustn't interfere with foliage or anything in nature. And this is the reason we don't garden. Someone, in fact, the same person who commented the other day, that got me talking rather too much about a subject, but there we are. said, why don't we do some gardening and become self-sufficient? And surely if anyone knows anything about Buddhism, as you do, most of those listening, unless you're new to this channel, when hopefully you'll pick up and come to understand there's a difference between Sangha, Buddhist monks, ordained Buddhist monks who have renounced worldly life, and lay practitioners whom are practicing the same Noble Eightfold Path, keeping moral virtue, practicing meditation and developing wisdom, but without renouncing the household life, still having families, jobs, children and so on. But that's not to say anything is left out from the fruits, the benefits of the practice for those practitioners, as long as they live in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path. Monks, in a way, make their life hard through renunciation, but also make their life more easy to practice in accordance with the Noble Eightfold Path by taking away those distractions, which is more noticeable when one delves back into worldly life in a project such as this, with the creation or refurbishment of this old building to make a meditation hall. To some extent, I'm having a more regular exchange with people, albeit it's very well managed locally, and I stressed from the beginning that it was very much their project. We would assist them financially as best we can and anything they need, but it's their project to get on with as they see fit, and organisation wise and materials purchasing wise and work wise, it's all down to local people whom are benefiting from that extra work and the punya karma, of course, they're creating in the good deeds they're doing that I talked about recently. But monks renounce themselves from a lot of these worldly activities, and one of those includes gardening or having anything to do with growing their own food, because we could then, as monks, become self-sufficient and go off as some other religions, monastic communities do, and grow their own food, make their own furniture, have their own animals, provide wool for clothing, everything. You can become self-sufficient. I could just go and live in a cave in the Himalayas, or I could just stay here and have nothing to do with anyone ever again, and just rely on perhaps what's left of my previous life's savings or something for a very little bit of food that I need. Or even, grow some food in a bit of ground, or just pick up what you can find through foraging. You could live this monastic life like that, but the Buddha wanted monasticism in the Buddhist sense to continue. And the way that's continued for 2,569 years is by its dependence on lay practitioners to provide them with food each day. So the monks don't ask for much, just a little rice in their bowl, maybe some chickpeas, some vegetables, and a little fruit. That's literally what I have to eat every day. And that is literally what is put in my bowl and provided, along with copious amounts of other things that I am very glad to, happy to, give away to those that need it and want it and enjoy it, all of that extra food. So you can see people want to feed monks, so there's no need for us to garden. It's not that we're lazy, as that commenter described. And I will on that point say that I've had to hide that describer's comments now from this platform, not because I can't deal with them. In a way it is, because to give this commenter credit, they say it's not personal. They're not directing their comments at me, but whereby they're criticizing other religions or other traditions of Buddhism or countries and getting into political, not debate, criticism, judgmental discussion at some length, I'm not able to respond to it. Neither do I want to respond to it. And I don't want other people whom are commenting just about meditation and this practice and wanting their questions answered about that to be distracted by what can be done in another on another platform, in another forum, on another day, in another place, at another time. So if people do want to air their political opinions or their religious views, it's all well and good if it's in accordance with our living and practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. We will discuss it here, as I'm doing now. But if it's just your views, then please air them elsewhere. This is all I can say, really, because it's not relevant to what we're talking about here, which is finding contentment in the situation as we have it. Not seeking, not going all over the planet looking for answers, not intellectually gaining so much knowledge that we're brimming over, that we can't take in any more, with all of the facts and figures, and still cannot see the wood for the trees. In other words, have so much information we just don't know what to do with it. We're bringing everything down, boiling it all down to the essence, taking everything down to the lowest common denominator of Buddhist practice, which is keeping precepts, meditating and developing wholesome mind states, and reducing unwholesome mind states, which is those kilesas. It is the breaking down of that ridgepole that I have asked these builders to so earnestly and diligently rebuild. A new ridgepole that will be a column in the centre of this building, hall, but will support the roof to keep the people it shelters away from rain when it's raining, the sun when it's hot, and support what will be a nice, cool environment for meditators, and an open environment for meditators. So I hope that's not waffled on too much around your comment. Can one become enlightened without becoming a monk or a nun and not following all of the precepts that monks and nuns do? So yes, as I was saying, lay practitioners can become enlightened, have become arahants. There are many accounts of such lay practitioners doing so, certainly to the first stage of enlightenment, sotapanna. And you don't, or in fact, as lay practitioners, it's very difficult to keep any of the additional monastic precepts. So 8 precepts is possible as a lay practitioner. I lived for many years on 8 precepts. So the 5 precepts: no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying or taking of intoxicants. 8 precepts are when the 3rd, sexual misconduct, changes to no sexual activity whatsoever, and then in addition, no eating in the afternoon. So after midday, there's no solid food. No beautification, jewellery or makeup, and no listening to entertainment, and no luxuriating in comfortable furnishings like comfortable beds, sleeping on a high and luxurious bed. It's possible for lay practitioners to keep those 8 precepts. When it comes to expanding on those to 10 precepts where you can no longer use the money, any money or form of financial bartering or anything to do with financial transactions, buying your own things, thus making you dependent on others again. This is what we were talking about, as I am. The 7th precept splits into 2, which is why it's 10, not 9, but that money thing is critical. That's the difference between the household life and a renunciant's life. So there are many people living in monasteries, including novices in some monasteries, and mechis in some, whom are female nuns who don't want to take bhikkhuni ordination, who remain on 10 precepts. So they're fully renunciant in that they can't use money, but can do things like cut this piece of leaf off this tree. They can cook food. They can even grow food in gardens because they're not prohibited from doing so. But when you ordain as a monk, you take on in total 227 precepts, and as a nun in total 311. So in that sense, for those, they're all prohibitive of such things like gardening. Not only just to prevent you killing things accidentally, albeit it wouldn't be with intention, but you'd intentionally pushing a spade or something, a tool, into the earth without knowing what was beneath the soil, and more than likely causing some harm. So whether it's intentional or not, you could avoid that by not doing it. So that's one reason. But the main reason is really, because that wouldn't be intentional killing, is that we are remaining dependent on lay practitioners. And this is very important, because by the fact that we've remained dependent on lay practitioners, we have kept in contact with lay practitioners, and we've been able to share the Dharma and our experience of full renunciation and monastic life with them, as they have been able, whilst leading worldly lives, as well as practicing and becoming, as long as they keep those 5 precepts, or 8, you can't leave any of those out, not the 5. The 8, yes, but not the 5. It is essential to become enlightened. Really, it's essential to be able to even practice, to keep all 5 precepts. Otherwise, you're really on the beginning stages of practicing. You're practicing to practice. If you're drinking, or if you're... That's the one that people in the West find difficult, intoxicants, to put aside. So, the other 4, no killing, stealing, sexual misconduct or lying, should be quite comfortable for us all to refrain from. It's the 5th, which isn't necessarily considered in many places the breaking of a moral code of any kind. It's not immoral to drink alcohol. But why it's so important is because it leads to immorality, which is why often people drink, to lessen their inhibitions. But we've spoken about that so much before, I won't go into it again. But of course, it is also reducing mindfulness. It is the opposite of mindfulness. And it is mindfulness that we're trying to develop. And this is why I don't sit on cushions, because the sand is like a cushion. And when I sit on the sand, it's similar to sitting on cushions. And that is when I do get numbness and pins and needles, like many of you ask me about. And I say, well, it's probably you're not getting the posture right in the first place. But often I've found, in my own experience, it was even something as not as cushion-like, but those 1-inch foam mats were enough to not make me mindful enough about the way I position everything on the ground to ensure I don't cut off anything that causes the numbness and pins and needles. So by sitting on just plain flat concrete floor with nothing more than a piece of cloth like this underneath you, you make sure you get it right in the first instance, and then you don't get this numbness. You get your posture, your sitting position right at the beginning. Much like everything we're doing in this practice with the keeping of sila, we're getting the foundations and the basis of our practice absolutely firm and in place, ready for us to begin, but then also to keep in place for us to continue. We set ground rules with everything we're doing, don't we, in lay life. And in monastic life, we have additional rules, but I think most monastics, I'm only speaking from my own point of view, but I'm sure they would agree with me, we don't consider them as rules, but as a supportive structure, a code of conduct, but a supportive structure that enables us to keep those core precepts of doing no harm, either to ourselves or others. So yes, keep the 5 precepts, but practice away and you can too become enlightened. Do you perform any type of yoga or exercise, except for cleaning the area where you live, or the vihara and meditation? I don't have much cleaning of the area where I live. I would do the sweeping outside, but the local folks like to do that, so I sweep my veranda and my room and occasionally wash the floor in my room, my kuti. When we have the meditation hall, maybe I'll have a little more responsibility to clean that, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone else took that on board, and I won't get in their way. But do I do anything else? I answered that yesterday. I certainly don't do any exercise other than getting up and down from the floor a lot, and I don't do any yoga or qigong or any of these things. And Well, maybe that's to my detriment, but it's not prescribed by the Buddha that we should do so. If we're not lazing around on comfortable furniture and we're sleeping little, we're eating little, then our bodies remain healthy. We have to keep in touch with lay people, as I was just saying, and part of that is going on Pindapata each day for that food. So I walk 4 kilometers each day and carrying a heavy bowl, which gets filled with food and made more heavy, and a bag for the overflowing abundance that goes into that bowl, which becomes also very heavy, as well as my umbrella and these robes, which when sweaty, even if it's not the rain that gets them, when the inside out rain, the sweat makes them wet, they get heavy too. So this is in a way exercise. It's enough respiratory and cardiac workout for me at my age, and I feel relatively healthy. A number of you have commented on my blinking, which is interesting. I'm surprised you can notice such things. I've never had the opportunity to see one of these videos other than on the device it's recorded on, which is an inexpensive smartphone, so it's not got a very good screen. So I didn't realize there was such detail that you would be able to even notice a thing as little as blinking. So I'm now mindful of my blinking. Apparently one eye doesn't blink in synchronicity with the other, which means I might be having a stroke or something like this. Well, if I have a stroke, well, that's the way it is. The Dharma hall will be, the meditation hall will be completed and there will be a vacant kuti for another monk to fill in due course, where I will take rebirth. Who knows? It rather depends, I suppose, between now and that impending stroke. On my next visit to the eye hospital, which is coming up next month, I have these 6 monthly checks with my eyes. I don't know if you remember, I had some difficulties with my eyes originally, a long time ago now, which are all fixed and all okay. And but I have checks with them. I think we all do at about my age. I'm 58 now, by the way, but that's a time of life when we start to not be able to hear so much, see so much, probably smell, taste and feel so much as we used to, as our sense doors begin to naturally close or draw shut. The curtains on our windows begin to bring in a little more shade. So in a way it's, I suppose, advantageous to our practice, but in other respects indicative of our bodies aging and ultimately sickening and finally eventually dying, that is inevitable and something that we can expect. And by expecting that and contemplating on death regularly, we are reminding ourselves that there's nothing to cling to here, nothing to hold on to, including those kilesas, which after all are the fuel to clinging, the fuel to attachment, the fuel to judgment. So those political ideas and criticisms and judgments, whether it's of religion or politics or countries, put them down. People have been doing that forever, as long as there's been humanity. Appreciably, there have to be some that make a difference, but do they? If we all just kept precepts, we'd all be living in harmony on this beautiful planet, which would be more beautiful if everybody just kept the 5 precepts, just one of the 5 precepts. Especially no killing. That would make a whole world of difference to humanity and all sentient beings that we live amongst. We'd all be living cordially. And whether it's in words or through actions, violence never helps. Accept things as they are. sometimes you have to say something. When the walls were looking like they weren't coming down in the meditation hall, I thought, I don't want to interfere. I'll be content just as it is. But then I realised, no, I have a responsibility. If I haven't explained myself clearly as to what it is that is required, especially as it ultimately I think will be easier, then it is an appropriate time and the right place, and if done so kindly and carefully and based on all the information, the truth necessary, then I can put my point across. So even then I left and thought, I'll leave this overnight, I'll think about it overnight. And even in this morning when the builders arrived very early, even just as I was going on Pindapata, I saw someone, the man running it and arranging everything. I thought, now is not the time, I'll wait till I come back. And after I cleared up and got everything ready before I ate, which normally you'd leave it until after you eat, but I thought, no, now is the right time. Now is the time to just raise this little issue. It's quite a big issue really, but it became a little issue by treating it that way. And everyone just smiled and laughed, and yes, why not? It means we have to have a ridgepole. I was delighted to hear the actual word ridgepole, for real, a real ridgepole. We're having a ridge and a pole to hold it up, which can be our Kilesa ridgepole. Mara, I see you, Mara, your house is destroyed. I can't remember the full wordage there, but you know the story. And this will be a significant part of the structure, but also a representative of a lot of our teachings. That analogy will be physically there. So everything applies, the Dharma, to all of our everyday lives and all of our actions of body, speech and mind, and how we go about doing things to make things ultimately not only easier for ourselves but everyone around us. And by that way we support each other, don't we? And the more of us that are doing that within our immediate vicinity, whether we're Buddhists or whatever, it doesn't matter. If you speak using the principles of right speech to others, you'll go a long way. If aggression creeps in, or verbal, whether spoken or written, violence is at all there, sounds like a strong word to use with speech, but the tongue is the most vicious of swords. And that must always be understood. And right speech is, again, as I've said many times before, very difficult to adhere to monitor. Even right now as I'm speaking, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say, what I'm going to speak about, until I read the next comment, which will prompt some more things that I'll say. But our voices, our speech is indicative of what's going on in our minds and in our hearts, the way we've been practicing, the way we've been keeping our precepts. And that is how we know in others how well they're benefiting with their practice, or how they may be just struggling, and how we may be able to support them in that struggle, help them. Eradicating those 5 hindrances, which are ultimately going towards eradicating these kilesas. Is it? Oh, sorry, this is a new comment. I look like the same one. It is nearly impossible to establish some meditation practice without joining a group and practicing daily for at least 3 days, or preferably 10. So I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. Not all people have a group that's available for them to join. I assume you're referring to a meditation retreat of some kind. People can learn to meditate at home. I've never been on a retreat. Now maybe that surprises you, but I've never been on a meditation retreat. I've held meditation retreats, I've taught at meditation retreats, I've taught meditation to many people, both one-to-one and in groups, face-to-face, and now a little, not so much teaching meditation directly, but talking about it online. But I've never been on an organised retreat, and my life is meditation. It's just what people are suited to. Some people find it difficult to get disciplined, to just sit and meditate, and can only do that in a retreat environment whereby they have no choice. But saying that, then very often it's their minds that are just going all over the place. You need to have meditation really practiced before even going on a 3-day retreat, let alone a 10-day retreat. So I would say to anybody, they need to start their meditation at home, alone. Meditate in the morning when you first wake up, meditate in the evening or night time just before you go to sleep. And you can do it. As long as you're keeping precepts, you can do it. So I wouldn't agree with that comment. It's most people's experience, they have to begin with meditating alone at home. Nothing wrong with retreats. They're a very important part of many people's lives to focus their practice and really get into their meditation away from all distractions. And at beginning stages of our practice, we need support, like stabilizers on a bicycle when learning to ride, or water wings, armbands, floats when learning to swim. We need an environment that's conducive to meditation. If we cannot make that at home, then yes, we may need to find somewhere where we can be supportive of peace and quiet, which is needed for meditation when you first begin. But ultimately, when you're practiced meditation, you can meditate anywhere, anytime, any place, in any situation, however noisy, however distracting, because one is closing down the sense doors, becoming secluded from the 5 hindrances, as well as physical sense contact and feelings and mental thought or proliferation. This is what we're practicing towards. But yes, we need supportive environments in the first instance, which is why this meditation hall is useful for people who are local or coming from further afield that may visit, to meditate, just to sit, do nothing, or to talk to me if they want to. Someone's reminding me that the female version of an abbot is an abbess. Yes, I did know that. The reason I wasn't mentioning gender specifics in that comment, I can't remember what it was about. We were talking about bhikkhunis. And very often these days, they don't like it to be even the Dharma and the suttas, for them to be read or spoken, or anything spoken about in gender specifics. So like we used to have actor and actress, we now just have actor. I was referring to abbot and abbess. We now just have whatever it is. But in fact, Buddhism, we don't have abbots. This is a Christian monastery thing. We might have an incumbent, someone who's overall responsible or in charge of certain administrative goings-on in a monastery. But they're not called an abbot because they're not a head monk. The head monk, if there is such a thing, which there is not in the Sangha, is the most senior monk, and seniority is purely based on the number of vasas, that is this rains retreat, time one has spent in the robes. So your time as a monk is what's relevant. The years spent living as a monk, as a renunciant, is what's relevant. It's not qualifications, it's not an appointment. So most monks, because I ordained late in life, whom are much younger than me, have more vassas and are therefore more senior than myself. But in this environment here, I'm first at hand with the practical side of anything that needs to be organised with regards to the goings on in my kuti and the building that will be a meditation hall next door. So I'll have to take responsibility for that, but fortunately it's no responsibility whatsoever because the locals can do that. But we tend to use this term abbot just for the sake of a better word than the most senior monk, who might have absolutely nothing to do with the day-to-day running and goings on of the monastery. And even as a junior monk, I would rather not have anything to do with the day-to-day goings on and running of a monastery, which is why I live in solitude in a small kuti, which needs little or no any such administration or management whatsoever. But in much larger communities you need a certain structure, yes. But in Buddhism generally the Sangha doesn't have a hierarchy. You may see this in culturally influenced areas in Buddhist countries, of course, as one does see this in culturally influenced areas in Christian countries with the Christian churches, or other faiths, other philosophies, other religions in other places. There does become, because it gets linked to politics, it gets linked to government, there does become a hierarchical structure. But we're not talking about that here. Referring you back to that previous comment that I was not talking about but has crept in again there. This is why there's no need in Buddhism. Buddhism as it is practiced is just that, without hierarchical structure getting in the way of that practice of keeping sila, meditating and developing wisdom. So my understanding of meditation is that it is not to stop the mind's thoughts, but to see them pop up and not get lost in the stream of that thought. Is this correct? Yes, it's correct, yep. The mind throws all kinds of random thoughts my way. Someone might be mildly ADHD, they're saying. Sometimes in a nonsense fashion, in a non-stop fashion. Am I right to meet them all and let them pass? Yes, I think whether we have any conditions or no conditions, our minds will throw all kinds of random thoughts, feelings, judgments, opinions, have discussions, fantasies, like that. But the more we practice, the less that happens. If we find that we're carried away with the thoughts, it's like we've got onto a train that's passing through the station. It's come to a stop, we've got on and we've gone travelling along with it. Then as the train comes to a stop, get off at the next station, get off at the platform, come back to the meditation object, the breath. No doubt, another train will come along, you'll jump on. But you can get off. The journey is endless. There's always another place to come back and get off and watch the breath, the meditation object. So you're correct, we're not getting into discussion with the thoughts. We're not focusing on why am I thinking about this. Meditation isn't a process of sitting and meditating on a subject matter. That's either reflection or contemplation, which is something one can do whilst practicing mindfulness, reflecting on the 32 parts of the body. That's quite a routine practice, like reflecting on metta as a practice, a meditation practice as a warm-up or a warm-down from meditation. But the meditation I'm referring to, samadhi, comes as a result of single-pointed focused awareness on one meditation object only, without analytical thought, allowing those thoughts to drop aside. So you're practicing you've explained it as best as it can be explained. Just as the thoughts arrive, arise, just know that. If you get carried away with them, know that, and then come back to the meditation object when you remember to do so. Why do Westerners who choose to change to a Buddhist path also change their name? Well, I don't know that they do. If you ordain as a monk or a nun, then you're required to renounce worldly life, and that includes your identity. This, after all, this is a practice. One of our aims is to reduce Sakkaya Ditthi, in fact, eradicate Sakkaya Ditthi, personality view. And a good step towards that is to get rid of the name. Of course, for legal reasons, we have to keep a passport with a name and probably other documentation relating to your birth name, unless you go to all sorts of extremes to change that. But without doing that, we don't use that name when we ordain. But as far as lay practitioners are concerned, they don't need to change their name. Some choose to. Maybe they've been given a Christian name and has Christian connotations, or another religion's name. I'm not sure of an example, but they may want to get away from that and therefore ask for or give themselves another name to reflect a change in the way they're living, or the way they're behaving, or what they're practicing. It's up to you. It's not necessarily that common in lay practitioners, so I'm not sure. If you're referring to monks and nuns, it is a requirement. You're renouncing that previous existence. And you do not need, if you go and live in a monastery and never come out again, even in going on Tudong, walking from monastery to monastery, you never need, I never need my own old name. I hand over a passport if I'm travelling, but I'm never required to say my name or confirm it or anything like that. They see the passport, they see the photograph, and that's it, it's done. Someone was watching, I think I shall leave the next 2 or 3 comments. No, I'll finish them off. Someone was watching because I think 2 of them are the same question. Someone was watching the video of me on Pindapata and was questioning as to why I was walking particularly quickly and not particularly slowly, because they walk more slowly. Now, personally, I don't think I'm walking particularly quickly, but I'm not walking slowly. It's my natural walking pace. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this question, not specifically about Pindapata, because you will see videos of Pindapata, monks on alms round, which are done in a very aesthetically pleasing way, where monks are walking very slowly in their bare feet with the bowl along a line of people offering food mindfully into the bowl. And this is more a ceremonial representation of going on alms round or Pindapata. But we must remember, I'm doing this as my livelihood. I have to walk from here into the village and then into the town and back again. So I wouldn't need to walk that far to get enough food to eat, but people are now expecting to see me, and so I do so. But it's a practical, functional process of going to get food. So I'm not walking particularly slowly in a ceremonial way. It's a real event. I walk as if I'm in a hurry to get somewhere, because I am. I'm hungry, I'm walking a long way, I want to get the food in the bowl and back again so we can have our meal. It's a practical thing I'm doing. It's done with mindfulness. It's done with the reverence and the gratitude of the dana being offered. And even chanting, for most people whom are offering dana, will receive a blessing. But it's done functionally and practically, not as some Instagram ceremony. That is what Pindapata is. And if you see real monks in Thailand, which is where you see monks on Pindapata mostly, they go from place to place relatively quickly. We don't loiter or hang around outside houses for a long time, waiting for people to do their sort of ceremonial presentation of what it is they have to offer. It's really a case of putting something in the bowl and moving on to the next one, like a canteen or a buffet line. It's a process, it's a practical part of monastic life. And in mindfully walking, we can walk quickly, slowly, or at an ordinary pace. In walking meditation, when we're walking up and down, so we don't have the benefit of the exercise of going on Pindapata each day, then you choose a pace. Some people will walk particularly slowly to really focus on the lifting, moving, placing, and feeling the ground beneath the sole of one's feet. And others may just want to march up and down really quickly to clear their heads. It doesn't matter as long as it's done mindfully. But we must move away from this idea that because you're a Buddhist monk or you're a Buddhist practitioner, you have to move around particularly quietly, speaking in a soft voice and very slowly. We're not zombies, we're human beings with a practical existence. This is not to say we don't adhere to right speech and right actions at all times, but not artificially so. Does that make sense? And then the next comment, which is the same, which I'm going to give a little bit of a brief answer to, is please, what made you become a Buddhist monk in the first place? Was it like Alan Watts, who saw some knickknacks in a shop, something like this? And then the other one, well, he wasn't really specifically a Buddhist, although he was more Buddhist than many Buddhists in the way that he taught. But he couldn't keep that fifth precept, remember. Sadly, it killed him. Thank you for your talks. Could you please tell us about how you came to Buddhism and how long it had been that you'd been practicing as a layperson before you ordained? So now on this point, can I direct you to the channel description, where there is a very, brief, but pretty accurate summary of my life until I ordained. And even maybe a little after, I can't remember what it says now. But that's about it. There were no magical mystery tours or little shops in places that brought about some inspirational idea. I suppose one as a child was brought up on Kung Fu and Shaolin monks, perhaps more than any other form of Buddhism, but certainly wise words in such TV presented ways and programming that could be found from a child's perspective did make sense and were user-friendly, as was the other Magic Monkey program, which was based on fiction and fact and a little bit of the Tipitaka. But all of these things were of interest to me, but no more so than any other religions. I think all my life I've been interested in religion from an outsider's point of view. I've never described myself as religious, but I've always been interested in religion, because interested in religion for its sheer power over people's minds, or people's perhaps lack of control over their minds through the influence of some religion, doctrine, indoctrination. This might sound a paradox coming from me, but Buddhism is about letting go, releasing us from indoctrination, giving us liberation, freedom from those kilesas, suffering, which is of our own cause, through greed, hatred and delusion, and not relying on external sources for that freedom and for that contentment, for that liberation, but through our own practice, our own efforts in keeping the precepts, in practicing meditation, learning from the scriptures, but using them as our instructions, our guidelines, our tools to practice. Like our monastic rules, our code of conduct, a support structure for that practice. And the creator of, the Vinaya is the creator of that environment in which monks and nuns can practice, and also that environment in which monks and nuns can support lay practitioners in their practice, which is where it is so two-way and it is so interdependent. That is, the life of lay practitioners and the life of renunciants, monks and nuns, are interdependent on each other, and evident in the fact that the Buddha Sasana, this religion as we call it, this way of life, has lasted unchanged at its core teachings, in any respect unchanged, for 2,569 years. So that idea inspired me. Then meditation led to, the practice of meditation led me towards Buddhism, and then my research into the different traditions of Buddhism led me to be able, through understanding, answering some questions I had, understanding the practice more of meditation, what was working, what wasn't working, and why, the way forward through Buddhism, through the understanding of Sila. And not only meditation, but the qualities we develop through generosity, sharing, kindness, truthfulness, faith, saddha, confidence, that is, rather than faith, blind faith, a confidence in this practice, in these teachings, that with setting a determination, as I did at the beginning of this Vassa, to simply sit and meditate with the determination that a meditation hall would happen. It has happened. It is happening. Purely as a result of confidence, faith, purely as a result of your generosity. Anumodana sadhu, 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 thank you very much for that support. Adding more confidence, more saddha, faith, in our fellow practitioners and humanity as a whole, that such kindness can be directed in, yes, such a positive way that many people will benefit from, but even from those even that won't first-hand necessarily be able to see it for themselves, but appreciate the good it's doing for others. The least of which is me. I have a kuti from my meditation, but I can hopefully teach many in that whole meditation to help them on their path towards Nibbana, which I hope with my sharing of these little musings of mine, prompted by your very useful comments that I'm very happy to receive, and also your emails that I respond to you directly and personally and in private to. It's useful to you, something you can use in your practice, but if not, you can just skim over until something comes up that is useful. Until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu. And just if I haven't been cut off, if I do disappear for a couple of days after this week, it is going to be as a result of weather, because I have heard some rain might be coming, and they might be still getting on with the noisy bit in the building next door, but I won't be able to come down here if it's raining. It'll be okay for me, but it wouldn't be so good for the device which makes this. So I'll have to bear that in mind, and I hope I won't be gone for long, if at all, if I'm gone at all. Until then, be happy and stay well. Suki Hotu.